Hello and welcome to episode 60 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, Marisa from Chicago will be joining us to talk about a lot of different aspects of her most recent trip to Walt Disney World, including her runDisney 10K for Princess Half Marathon weekend and her stay at Port Orleans Riverside. Later, my wife Courtney will be here for another dining review. This time, we'll be talking about our recent visit to Mythos in Universal's Islands of Adventure. You will not want to miss this review because Mythos is one of the most popular theme park restaurants in the world. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everybody that I will be walking all 620 miles of the Ireland Way in just a few short months. I'm doing this to raise money and awareness for the nonprofit organization Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. In episode 59 that aired on St. Patrick's Day, I go into more detail on the pilgrimage and I speak with someone from Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence so you can hear some of the ways your donations will be spent. Well, since runDisney is a huge topic of conversation today, I wanted to mention that I'll be running the Tower of Terror 10-miler as part of Springtime Surprise Weekend just next week. Marisa and I will be chatting more about that, but I would love for you to support my pilgrimage and my run. In honor of my 10-mile run, I would like to ask for you to donate $10 at the link in the description. That is just $1 for every mile that I'll be running on April 3rd. Just taking the time to make a $10 donation will really help break the silence against domestic violence. We've built a big enough community that if we all do a little, it will really make a difference for a smaller organization. Disney adults get a bad rap and the theme park community can be really toxic. However, together we can show that they're not only good, but great people in this community, even if we aren't always the loudest. Just $1 per mile. It would mean the world to me. The link is in the description and there's a pinned post on our Twitter page at TGTT Podcast. Thank you so much in advance. The first donation I received for my fundraiser came from my good friend Marisa from Chicago. Thank you for joining us on the show, Marisa.
Thanks for having me. As always, happy to be here.
So you recently had a visit to Walt Disney World for Princess Half Marathon weekend. You did the Princess 10K. We're going to talk about some other aspects of your trip a little later. But let's start with the Princess 10K itself. This was your second time doing the Princess 10K, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, so one of the things that everybody loves about these runDisney events, the characters. So who were some of the characters that you got to see while you were running? Did you stop and take pictures with any of the characters?
So the 10K was themed to Tiana. So of course she was on the course. So I stopped and took a picture of her. I found myself doing this thing during the run where instead of taking pictures with the characters, I was just kind of running up and taking pictures of them because I didn't want to spend all that time in line. And I think if you're, someone like me who's a little concerned about their pace time, that's the way to do it. You still get pictures of characters, but you don't have to sacrifice minutes or, however long in those lines. Tiana's was especially long, of course, because she was, the figurehead for that race. Anna and Elsa were also there. Mickey was all dressed up in his fancy outfit. He had like this little hat on and a fancy cape, so that was really fun. And then Chip and Dale were a lot of fun to see. I liked seeing them out, and even like in between people going to take pictures with them, they were like interacting with each other and kind of goofing off, playing off each other. So that was a lot of fun as you're like running up past them to see that. It kind of gives you a little energy boost. And then the one character I did actually stop to take a picture with was Donald. And I later found out that that spot was typically Donald and Goofy, but Goofy, I guess, had gone to take a little bit of a break, maybe take a little nap. It was still pretty early. So I just got a picture with Donald, and he was wearing his like beach gear. So that was really cute. It was over by the beach club. And I know there were more characters on the race, but it was one of those things where it's a little bit of a blur. So those are the ones that stood out to me the most, the ones I really remember seeing. But I know there were more.
So I don't know what the timing was like for you, but I know when I did the Wine and Dine 10K back in November, when I got to Beach Club and Boardwalk in that area, that was just when the sun was starting to peak up a little bit, and that was just gorgeous being there at that time. I don't know what it was looking like when you were there, but wow, was that one of the best memories I've had from a Run Disney race, just running past Boardwalk, past Beach Club, and just seeing this amazing sunrise.
Yeah, so I think we were there right around the same time because I was catching that a little bit too, and just seeing the sun come up over the water and just the buildings in the back, it was absolutely gorgeous. And then, of course, the route that we had, we continued that path to go into Epcot. And I've talked about it before how much I love running through Epcot as the sun's coming up, but it was still just as gorgeous as ever. Getting to see the parks that early, especially over by Epcot, where, it opens kind of late. So you really don't get that dawn in the park ever. And so getting to see that was just so incredible and so special. And they've got the torches burning, and then they actually had the barges out in the water for Harmonious. They had those lit up and actually had little like race graphics on them. So that was really cool to see as well.
And I can't believe I'm about to say this, but we're about a little over a week away from the next Run Disney event, and that is the Springtime Surprise. I'm signed up for the Tower of Terror 10 miler. We're going to do that one at the same time. However, you signed up for the entire challenge. So how are you feeling about that?
Well, it seemed like a really great idea at the time. And hopefully, you know, just a little bit from now, I'll be saying it was a great idea. But I'm feeling a little nervous. Those dates are coming up pretty close, so I'm not necessarily as confident as I'd like to be. But I also feel like no matter what, I'm going to feel a little nervous by it. The longest race I've run is a 10K, so the 10 miler is definitely an added challenge for me. I'm excited for that challenge, but it is always a little nerve-wracking too, especially with the added pressure of needing to finish that race without getting swept in order to get the challenge medal. So we'll see.
Well, I know everybody listening is going to be rooting you on for that. I think you're going to be able to do it. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you're also planning on, for the first time ever, when you have that Tower of Terror 10 miler medal, riding the Tower of Terror. Are you nervous about it at all? Have you been preparing for that like you've been preparing for the race?
I might be preparing for that more than the race. I've watched a few ride-throughs. I think I might try to memorize the different drop sequences just to be prepared. We'll see. The drop rides have never been my thing, so I've avoided it, and I think avoiding it for so long has made it this like insurmountable beast of a ride that I've built up in my head. And I think I just have to like remind myself when I'm standing in line, nervous. My sister did this when she was like 5, and she's still here to tell the tale. So she's fine. I can do it. If she could do it as a kindergartner, certainly I can do it in my 20s. Fingers crossed. We'll see. But I will have a support system in the form of my cousin to make sure that there's no chicken exit allowed. So she will be forcing me on.
Keep in mind, this is coming from somebody who had nightmares of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, if I'm not mistaken, from the time we talked about Disneyland. So I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to handle Tower of Terror, but I have faith in you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and believe it or not, my sister was the scaredy cat of the family, so that really shows how brave we were as kids. But I have hope that I'll get off and go, really? That was it?
One can hope, of course. So then, the day before the Princess 10K, we actually hung out for a little bit in Epcot, and you had a list of snacks. You came prepared. There were a bunch of snacks that you wanted to try while you were all over Walt Disney World that weekend, did you get to knock off a good amount of your list? And what were some of the highlights?
I did actually. So before coming to Disney, I've been learning that as I take more trips, I more and more food motivated around the parks, and I'm allowing myself more time to actually enjoy the food because it's not so much like, okay, you have to go ride this, now you have to go ride this. I have the time to pick out a snack. So I made up a list of all the different snacks I wanted to try. I broke it down by park, and then I had a separate section for Disney Springs and a separate section for resorts. If you are someone who likes lists, boy, was this a great thing. It was so satisfying, like checking each item off as I got it. And I was able to check off a good amount, honestly, more than I was expecting. Some of the foods were repeats, like the caramel popcorn in Germany. That's, a long-standing favorite of mine. Always a 10 out of 10. I tried the maple popcorn from Canada for the first time, and that was very good. I can see why people like that one. A bonus of the maple popcorn is it's actually eligible for popcorn bucket refills. So if you have a popcorn bucket and you want something other than, your standard regular butter popcorn, you can get that at the Canada popcorn stand. So that's cool.
So when you got the Germany popcorn, I actually picked it up at the same time you got it, but I still have not tried the maple popcorn in the Canada pavilion, mostly because usually when I'm at Epcot, there's a festival going on. You happen to be there during Diet Epcot, so I'm usually hitting all the festival booths. Is there a discernible difference between the maple popcorn in Canada and the caramel popcorn in Germany? Like, can you really taste the difference in it?
I definitely think there's a pretty big taste difference. The Germany popcorn is much sweeter. The maple popcorn has a much more subtle flavor, so you still get more of like a popcornness to it. It's so hard to describe. I am not well versed enough to get the right words, but there's almost a nuttiness or something to the maple popcorn. Maybe it's more caramelized because the caramel popcorn is made so fresh. I think the maple popcorn, the syrup caramelizes a little bit and it gives it a much different flavor. I definitely recommend it. It was very good. Yeah, it has a much more subtle flavor than the caramel popcorn does.
All right, let's hear about some more of those snacks.
So when we were in Germany, when I got the popcorn, I also got the gingerbread caramel cookie, which is something I've been hearing a lot about. Like that keeps popping up as, oh, you must try, must try. It was very good. The gingerbread, it's two gingerbread cookies with like a caramel frosting in the middle. So, it's gonna be good. But it was also very sweet. It was one that I split with my cousin, and I don't think I could eat a full one. So just keep that in mind if that's something that you're going for. It's a big cookie. It's, a lot more filling than you'd think it is, and very, very sweet. But still, I can see why it's a favorite.
And I know while we were there at the same time, you tried the poutine. I know that I believe you're lactose intolerant, and if you're going to have something dairy, you have to really be prepared for it and you have to really want it. So you saved up those dairy points, if you will, to have the poutine. And I just want to know, was it worth it?
Totally worth it. Will be worth it every time. It's so good. Even as someone who's supposed to be staying away from dairy, I can't stay away from it when it's in poutine form. It's, something that I tried a couple years ago, and I think about it a lot when I'm at home in between trips. And I think, it's not so much X many days until I'm back in Disney. It's X many days until I'm back in Epcot for poutine. And that is something where even with the festivals, I will make time to get that poutine instead of a festival snack. I love it that much.
So just run through some of your other favorite items that you tried on this trip.
So a standout in Magic Kingdom for me, they had a candied bacon, and that was over at Westward Ho. That was very good. It ended up being dinner one night, kind of on accident, where we were waiting for the fireworks and realized we hadn't eaten in, 6 hours. So we were like, oh, maybe we should have something. And most things were closed or not available for mobile order. So we ended up getting candied bacon, and it was excellent. It was that like perfect sweet, salty, savory combination and just melted in your mouth. So that was a kind of a sneak hit. Big fan of that.
That was the most penultimate Magic Kingdom statement that you ever have said in your life. We just realized we hadn't eaten anything in forever because Magic Kingdom's not the best food park, but also you can just be so busy running from ride to ride to ride that 8 hours later you realize you haven't eaten anything. And sometimes once you hit that moment when you realize it, you realize you've been hungry for 2 hours and we're just fighting through it. So that is definitely a feeling I have had many a time at Magic Kingdom.
Yep, that's kind of exactly how it happened to us, where we were just, busy, focused on what we wanted to do. And then when we got that like moment of peace, when we found seats for the fireworks and we realized we still had like 40 minutes until the show. And then we were sitting there and we were like, wait a minute, we haven't eaten and we're pretty darn hungry. So that, it ended up being a good dinner. Came with chips as well, so that was nice. And I mean an actual like bag of potato chips, not like fresh cut chips or anything like that. But it was still very good. I would definitely get it again. Another standout snack in the parks, in Hollywood Studios, we stumbled upon a pretzel cart. We were looking for the pepper jack pretzel because that's supposed to be very good. And when we ordered it, they told us they didn't have that, but they had a cheddar jalapeno pretzel. And we were like, well, that sounds very good, so we'll try that. Oh, it was good. It was very good. This was our breakfast at 10 a.m. Totally worth it. It was a pretzel stuffed with cheddar and jalapeno. So warm, savory, delicious, a little bit of a kick to it, but really not enough to make it a deterrent, I think, for people who don't like spicy foods. It was excellent. And this is something that I will probably be on the lookout for next time. It was so good.
I had it at Magic Kingdom for the first time very recently. I think it was back in December that a friend suggested it to me and I had it, and it really is good. And I think I would agree with your statement that it's not too spicy. I think pretty much anybody can handle it, but it's surprisingly good. And you and I are both really big fans of savory treats as opposed to always going with the sweet treats. So that is one that really meets that standard.
Definitely. And I mean, I've know we've talked about it before with Hollywood Studios really having a wealth of sweet treats and not too many savory things. This is a really great savory option to kind of have in your back pocket and know you can go to. So I really appreciate that. But then to totally flip it and talk about sweet, we stayed at Port Orleans Riverside for this trip. And that's just a quick little walk away from French Quarter where there are beignets. And we were actually on this trip over Mardi Gras. So we were like, well, we have to stop and get beignets. That's, we can't not do that. They were so good. They were so good. And, I was talking with some friends who are actually from New Orleans and they were like, yeah, they're good. But, now you need to come here and have real beignets. And I was like, well, listen, if they're even better than that, you've sold me, because they were fantastic.
So that's going to lead right into the next topic of conversation, because I did want to talk about your stay at Port Orleans Riverside. Port Orleans, one of the very last resorts to reopen at Walt Disney World. They kept that closed for a really, really long time after all of the reopenings in 2020. This is a moderate resort that is a big-time favorite with a lot of Walt Disney World fans. What did you think of it?
So going into it, I was a little nervous just because I wasn't sure how I would like the multiple bus stop system. I haven't stayed at a resort where I've had to deal with that before, so I wasn't too sure how I'd like that. It turned out not to be an issue at all. which was great. The buses we had no problems with our entire trip, which was fabulous and also not something I was expecting. But the resort itself was beautiful. The grounds were gorgeous. The rooms were pretty large. I think they were refurbed pretty recently because they all had that like fake wooden flooring, no carpet. Love that. And we ended up in a great location too, where we were closest to the main bus stop. So that was very nice. And we were right by the lobby. So that made everything really easy and convenient. The more time we spent there, like we kept turning to each other and going, this is really beautiful. It's really nice here. This is gorgeous. And I don't think either of us really expected to like it as much as we did. Like it was kind of one of those we booked it because it was all that was available situations. And now we're like, oh, we would stay here again. This was really nice. So I'm glad it worked out the way it did for us to stay there.
I don't know how many of the other moderates you've stayed at Walt Disney World, but how does it compare to some of them you have tried in the past?
So this was actually my first time staying at a moderate. I've tended to go to the extremes in the past, but definitely I would say, especially for a trip like during a race weekend, if you're like we were on this trip, we ended up spending more time at the resort. We spent time at the pool. I think it's definitely worth upgrading to a moderate from a value to have those extra amenities and to have like a nicer pool space and nicer grounds to walk around on. And the resort actually did a like runner celebration, which was really cool. They had like a little VIP area by the pool, where they had like fruits and water and a little like photo area and foam rollers. And so that was really fun and a nice little perk. It was something that I was like, oh, I actually would consider staying in moderates now. So it was a great experience overall.
The only issue I've ever had with Port Orleans is the same issue that I have with Coronado Springs, and that is that bus issue. So if you weren't having a problem with the buses, then I would absolutely stay there if I knew the transportation was going to be reliable.
Yeah, we got very lucky, I think, or maybe they just stepped up their game. I'm not sure. But the longest we waited for a bus the whole trip was maybe 20 minutes, and that was going back to the resort from Hollywood Studios in the middle of the day. Obviously, they won't be running the buses as frequently at that point, but even at park close, they were, a bus was pulling up right as one was leaving. So that was never an issue. We at one point were rope dropping Hollywood Studios, but Magic Kingdom was opening around the same time. And they had like 3 Magic Kingdom buses pull up at once because they knew there were a lot of people. I don't know if they just planned for it to be really busy or what, but the buses were good. I'm crossing my fingers that holds because we're actually staying at Coronado for the springtime race. We'll see. That could make or break a couple things.
And going back to Run Disney, and this involves the transportation a little bit as well, you had to take a bus over to the expo. What were your experiences with the Run Disney Expo? Because there were some issues during Princess Half Marathon weekend.
Yes. So this is going to sound very silly, but we ended up flying in a day early. So we were supposed to fly in Thursday, which was the day of the expo. And we ended up flying in Wednesday evening and staying at like a Disney Springs hotel so that we could get to the expo early because we'd seen marathon weekend, all these issues. The lines were just absurd and we didn't want to get caught in that. So on Thursday morning, we ended up taking an Uber to the expo because the buses weren't running yet. And we were like, it's like 9:15, expo opens at 10. We want to just play it safe. It was a very good thing we did because the buses didn't start running until 9:30. And at that point, the line was already like 2 hours long. By the time we were walking into the building, which not even the expo itself, because once you go into the building, you go into another holding room where you have to do switchbacks in the queue in order to get into the expo. By the time we were walking into that room, the line was over 3 hours long. And that was just for the merch. We went to the merch first instead of getting our bibs first, which I think was the move, which clearly everyone else did as well. I mean, we waited half hour, 40 minutes to get in, which all things considered, not too bad. But that line was piling up fast and it was long, and people were spending their whole day basically at the expo at that point. That was a little frustrating, just having to wait in that line, especially because it was just like one of those things you're like, okay, I wish everyone could agree not to do this, where we could just like maybe have assigned times or something and not hoard merch, but people won't do that. So you gotta play within the system we've got, and getting there early was definitely an advantage.
After all that wait, you had to do a little shopping, right? Like, it's almost one of those tricks that Disney does. Once you've waited 40 minutes or 2 hours or 3 hours to see the merch, well, now you have to buy the merch.
So I actually made it out of the expo unscathed, which I was very proud of, but also because I kept walking around telling myself, you're gonna want to save this for when you do the challenge, when you do your very first challenge. Wait and save it to spend it there. My cousin definitely got a few things, but it was her first half marathon and her first challenge, so she wanted to commemorate that. And she's big into the spirit jerseys, so she wanted to make sure she got the spirit jersey from the run. I am not a spirit jersey person, as much as I try. It's just not my thing. So I was able to make it out of there okay, but my cousin probably isn't too happy about that because I definitely encouraged a few of her purchases, going, come on, you need this. We waited how long for this? Come on. It's worth it though. Like you said, you wait that much time, you're putting in the time and effort for these runs, got to commemorate it somehow.
So speaking of the springtime surprise, I think it's about time we end this segment so you can go take a lap around the house or something and get 1 or 2 more training runs in before next week. I can't believe we're saying that already. Next week, the springtime surprise.
So soon. And looking forward to seeing you there.
Marisa will certainly be back on the show plenty, especially to talk about her springtime surprise challenge. Since both Marisa and I will be running the Tower of Terror 10-miler, I just want to quickly ask again to donate $1 per mile through my fundraising link for Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. I am not getting 1 penny from the money that's donated, and we're working to fund all of the fantastic programs at BTSADV. The link is in the description, and you can listen to episode 59 of the podcast to hear all of the ways your donations will help. So we've talked a lot about Walt Disney World in this episode. Right now, let's head east on I-4 for a dining review at Universal Orlando Resort. Here's my wife, Courtney, for that review. Thanks for being here, Court.
Really looking forward to talking about it.
So recently we finally took the time to try Mythos at Universal's Islands of Adventure, often considered one of the best theme park restaurants in the world, and we wanted to put that to the test. Spoiler alert, we did really enjoy ourselves. So let's start with the appetizers, or the starters as they're called on the menu. I got the Meze Platter. This is vegetarian. It's $11. A tasting of house-made hummus, baba ganoush, marinated fennel, Kalamata olives served with charred pita. I don't really like olives. I thought the baba ganoush was really good. The marinated fennel was good, and the hummus. I really enjoyed this. It was $11. I think that's about what you can expect to pay for something like this. Maybe even a little less than you'll pay at some other restaurants. It was a good way to start the meal. Now for Courtney's appetizer, she got the grilled lamb meatballs for $14, grilled spiced lamb, rosemary-infused polenta, Kalamata olives, and sweet chili marinara with mint chimichurri. Courtney, what did you think?
I really loved these and definitely recommend them. So I wanted to try something like this that contained lamb. I don't normally eat lamb. I've maybe had it once or twice ever in my life. And this restaurant is known for their lamb, especially the lamb burger. So I thought trying the meatballs would be a good way to try their lamb offering. And so when they talk about this being spiced, it really was not spicy hot. It had a lot of different spices, making it extremely flavorful. I think the meatballs were a good balance between a filler and meat, and the meat did not taste overpowering or gamey or too strange. All of the spices, the marinara, the chimichurri, which was just a nice light touch, balanced everything out. And then there was polenta as well, which was a creamy and also flavorful enough addition. This was actually a very big portion to me, and I got almost full right away from this, so I really loved it.
Before we move on to our entrees, which were a little bit expensive, I want to let you know that at Mythos, you can also get some sandwiches that are maybe a little more affordable than the entrees. There's the Mythos Signature Lamb Burger Courtney mentioned, which is $18. The Fork, Knife, and Spoon Grilled Cheese for $17. The traditional bacon cheeseburger for $18, and the balsamic grilled chicken sandwich for $16. So maybe you're not looking to spend some of these bigger prices for the entrees. You can still try this really, really great restaurant. So Courtney's entree was the pan-roasted wild salmon for $28, forbidden black fried rice, edamame, beach mushrooms, white asparagus, and romesco sauce. What did you think of it, Court?
I liked it. However, I'm not too sure that I would get it again. I wanted to try something a little bit adventurous, so this was good. I just wasn't a huge fan of that black fried rice. It had a nice flavor, almost a little bit of a smoky, earthy, slightly grilled flavor, and I just wasn't 100% digging it. But you could tell it was made well. Fresh edamame, nice mushrooms, which I love mushrooms. The asparagus was cooked perfectly. The sauce that came with it was definitely flavorful, and it was all kind of balanced out. As for the salmon, I loved the salmon. I'm a seafood lover. I don't always get to have it very often, but in a setting like this, I think it was perfect, and I had the confidence that it would be prepared very well, and it was. A perfect texture. There was kind of a crust of salt on the outside, which really added to it. And again, you can tell that everything was fresh, great ingredients, prepared very well.
And I actually got one of the cheapest entrees. It was the spinach and ricotta ravioli for $19. Davina tomatoes, sweet peas, herb whipped ricotta, and basil pesto sauce. And I'm going to say, even if this wasn't the cheapest option among the entrees, I would still say get this. This was so good. When we were at the table and I took my first bite of this, I joked that it was like the Simpsons episode with the baseball players when Ken Griffey Jr. said it's like there's a party in your mouth and everyone's invited. Like, it was just hitting a wall of flavor. I now know for a fact the way that I like to go to restaurants. When I find that thing I like, I stick with it. I am never going to eat anything else at Mythos besides the spinach and ricotta ravioli for $19. It was so good. Get it. Trust me, you will absolutely love it. Even if you're going with kids who aren't that adventurous, while this is maybe a little more adventurous than some similar dishes would be at other restaurants, I still think it's familiar enough that even kids who aren't adventurous are going to love it. Get this dish. It is probably the best thing on the menu, and I can say that having not tried very much on the menu. It's just that good. Just to sort of close this out, our service was incredible. We were seated right by the big glass window outlooking the rest of Islands of Adventure. We could see Hulk. We could see Velocicoaster. We could see over to Superhero Island and the comic book section. It was a beautiful atmosphere. The inside is well themed. Like I said, the service, phenomenal. I can see why so many people swear by this restaurant, and I'm going to go back a lot more now. And yes, I am going to get the same dish each and every time.
So I think I'm pretty well in agreement with Rick here. I love this restaurant. I kind of wish that I had gotten something else, but that's okay. I wanted to try something a little bit different. I like to try a nice seafood dish when I can, and I'm feeling a little fancy, if you will. And I like to be a little adventurous. And this was good, but seeing Rick's dish, I kind of wished I had had that. Sometimes you're more in the mood for a comfort food or a certain flavor than other types of flavors. And I think this has something for everyone. Those lamb meatballs were fantastic. And yes, the service and servers were awesome. Top notch. The atmosphere was super great as well. It was really nice where we were seated to have the view that we had, looking over the water, looking out over the other parts of the park, seeing the roller coasters going. That really added to it. And the theming inside is kind of that reddish orange rock and makes you feel like you're in caves. You're instantly cooled down. It's a wonderful environment for a hot day to get out of the heat. There's also some great artwork in the way of mosaics on the ground and a few neat statues which keep you in that kind of Greek mythology theme. Overall, 100% would go back and definitely recommend this.
That was just a quick dining review of Mythos at Universal's Islands of Adventure. Of course, if you go to the YouTube channel for Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty, we're always sharing videos of different food items throughout the theme parks. Some of these items from Mythos either have been or will in the future be featured in video form on the YouTube channel. So please go there, like, subscribe, comment. That would really help us out as well. Thank you for joining me, Courtney.
As always, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to episode 60 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. As always, we'll be back with another brand new episode next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.